It's the evening now. I can still see some light off on the horizon. I'm down about 6 miles north of downtown Tucson, Arizona. If you look at this screen, you'll probably notice a faint little circularity right about there. Now I'll give you a clue. I just did a 3-star alignment, only 2 of which were visible. One was Vega, the other was Deneb, and the third was Capella, but Capella is still behind the house. So I decided to return to the region of Vega and turn this study up. Now you can see the settings off to the right here. Basically, I'm at a gain of 300 and I have an exposure time of 30 seconds going on right now, depending upon how I set this whole up. I have set it up in auto mode. Now we are in planetary imaging mode, and that's quite all right. I haven't turned on the cooler, which you can see at the top, and we are getting a view of course, the Ring Nebula. Now notice something I discovered. There is a zoom function associated with this, and I am now zooming. Now keep in mind, this is with a 3-inch telescope, well, 80 millimeters. Now we don't expect to see the central star, but we are getting a pretty decent view at 140% gain. Now this is amazing. Because this ZWO system has so much pixel resolution, you can literally do a tremendous amount of gain using the interface, which is the ASI Studio. And there we have it. No view of the central star, however, but the ring of luminous planetary ejected material from the central star, which is now aging out, is quite visible on the screen. You would never see a view like this through a 3-inch telescope. You'd see a vague elongation of the planetary. Now, I am starting to make out the central star. There are 30-second exposures, and the gain is at 300, so it's significantly lower than the maximum gain of 44 decibels in the Revolution 2 system I normally use from the 6-inch telescope. Not bad. There is our view, and we're noticing that we are getting a little bit of drift here. And this would be corrected if we had an off-axis guider, but I'm doing real-time imaging. I am not making any kind of attempt to get the best possible images. I just want to gather information, give you a sense of the various studies that may be of interest tonight. And that will be the circumpolar studies that I cannot see from the backyard, and I think this is a very promising start. What we're currently looking for here is the first study on my list of the evening. It is NGC 891, a beautifully presented large edge-on galaxy said to be a duplicate of our own, as though we're seeing it about 31 billion light years. I am not seeing it anywhere on the screen, which concerns me. Now that could be an alignment issue. There are plenty of stars on the screen, but as I mentioned before, we are not quite seeing it. Now I can play with the gain to see if there's any visibility with it, or we can assume that we do not have a good alignment. However, I'm seeing a faint scratch of light there, which means maybe what I ought to do is try to manually change the gain to begin with to see if there's any improvement. But yes, right in this region of the screen, we are kind of seeing something there. So we'll take it off auto and we'll push it way up to 545 from 300. The screen went white on me, of course, and you can see that as it captures the image. So basically, we're roughly doubling the sensitivity, but I have no idea of how that actually works, only making reference to my experiences with the Rev 2 system, which basically used the old film standards of decibels. The exposure time is going through, I believe, 5 or 6 cycles of exposure of 18 seconds, it looks like. So what I'm going to do is turn off the camera until it presents itself. we're now getting a splotch of color on the screen. And that was after several exposure iterations. It looks like the exposure is, like I said, about 18 seconds from what I saw. And the camera now is presenting a little bit more of what I would consider to be an edge-on galaxy there. Let's see what happens to that. We are looking at almost a 1 degree field. I would say it's somewhere about 50 to 52 arc minutes in size square. We are actually imaging through a 3-inch telescope. I have seen this galaxy at the eyepiece of a 6-inch telescope on a decent night of seeing, and it did present the dark lane that bisects the galaxy. I would expect to be able to get as good a view as that using the imaging system set up with the 3-inch scope. However, we are a bit hampered by the sky conditions. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to turn the camera off now, and then we will return once it fully integrates. It's, I believe it's 5 passes using this modality. Okay, I've just adjusted the exposure time up to 42 seconds. That's typically the amount of time it takes to get a fully developed image using the Rev 2. 6 passes at roughly 5 seconds with image stabilization, and that usually gives me the ability to see very small galactic nuclei down to about magnitude 16.5. Once again, that's 42 decibels gain on the Rev 2 system, and an exposure time of 2.5 seconds 6 times over, which usually takes, with image stabilization, 40 seconds. Now you'll notice that the screen was blacker when I first initialized. That's because I ran up the exposure time and left the gain at roughly about 550 to 560. I'm going to turn off the camera and allow this to develop a little longer. Okay, so I had to completely change the modality to real-time modality, and I'll show you how you go to it. You close this baby out, you go back to the master, there's an ASI live, deep live stacking, and that's the one I'm going to go to now. That seems to be the one that is closest to the Rev 2 in terms of giving you instantaneous imagery. You can see the camera is there. All I have to do is activate it. It's got a gain of 460. I can probably improve that. The exposure time is 5 seconds. You can see instantly the galaxy is kind of sort of visible there, but it's not a good look. So let's give it a chance to develop an image here. I'm also noticing this kind of like matrix, modeling matrix all over like a chessboard. And that's something that may possibly be addressable if I were to turn on the cooler. But let's first give it a chance natively in this live imaging mode to see if we can get a positive view, or a decent view, because I'm pretty positive now NGC 891 is apparent right there on the screen. I have to say that using this approach to imaging is problematic because it takes quite a while, and so I'm hoping I can get, for the NGC catalog, if I were to continue using this rather than the Rev 2 imaging system, that I could compile all my images within 45 seconds because I have so many to go through. Typically there's over 40 NGC studies visible from the backyard in John Day. And this would be far too long an approach to be able to use in the future. However, if I conclude my sky tour of the NGC catalog using the Rev 2, then I can pick out specific studies of interest, and I could take more time on each of them and keep the videos down to about 15 minutes and maybe show 3 or 4 studies over the course of that time. So you can see the image is still populating. However, the view of the galaxy is not particularly solid. So what I'm going to do is maybe turn on the cooler at this point, but I'm going to turn the camera off from recording first. Okay, one thing I want to show you is the maximum amount of exposures I can do in this mode is 5. And I'm not sure if that's the number of exposures or the exposure time. It looks like it's repeating the modality from 5 seconds down, and it may actually be stacking the images. So what I can do next is maybe experiment with live image stacking, because this would be the equivalent of just doing a single 5-second exposure on the Rev 2, which is generally the maximum sensitivity of a single pass, but it doesn't really give you the kind of views you might expect. So let's switch to a different mode. Camera stacking really isn't working very well. It just takes a single image and you're supposed to grab them all and then you're supposed to somehow integrate them offline. This is probably not the approach I want to take. Definitely not the approach I want to take.